About 10 seconds here before we kick off. 5, 3. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 9th, 2023 Democracy Day. If you would all stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I make a couple of comments here?
No, not yet.
It's about the pledge.
Not yet.
Okay, fine.
I'd like to welcome everyone. My name's Mike McCann. I'm the mayor of the city of Defiance. I'd like to thank Mr. Steve Corbett, First Ward City Councilman, Josh Mass, Third Ward City Councilman, John Hancock, Second Ward City Councilman, and Mrs. Jill Crutch, our councilperson at large. Welcome to all of you here. Tonight, I'll do the best of my ability to follow Robert's Rules of Orders here. That is what means I appreciate it. You not speak until recognized. And Mr. Peabody, you've asked for the floor, so I'll give you a few minutes, sir. What is it?
Okay, just a few facts that people might not know about the pledge. I've got a picture here from 1942. Originally, when the pledge was adopted or written in 1892, they had people with their hand out pointed to the flag with their palm up. In the 40s, that was deemed too close to being a Nazi salute, so they changed it, and then in 42 it was with their hand pointed out like this. Now it's down across their heart. It was also changed in 54 when they added the words "under God" in the pledge. First of all, they changed the salute because, like I said, it was too close to the Nazis. They added the words, the flag of the United States, because at the time there were a lot of immigrants, and they wanted the immigrants to understand that they were pledging allegiance to the United States and not to their home country. Then in 54, the words "under God" were added. Eisenhower was a great supporter of that. Just some things you might not know. It's kind of interesting that they started out with a Hitler salute.
Thank you, Mr. Peabody. I appreciate those comments. So, Mrs. Dolores Whitman has asked for some time to go through some PowerPoint presentations that she's prepared. So, again, before you speak, I would appreciate if you would give me the opportunity to recognize you. So I would appreciate if everyone would give Dolores the opportunity to speak uninterrupted. And at the conclusion of her presentation, which may take a little time here, I'll recognize anyone that would like to discuss anything that Dolores happened to bring up. So Dolores, you have the floor.
Thank you. You can all hear me. I don't need to go to the microphone, correct?
You know, Dolores, we can hear you,
Oh.
but I don't know about the folks on television, so I think I would appreciate it if you would approach the microphone, please.
Many of you may be wondering, who is Dolores Whitman and why is she involved in this City of Defiance issue? I'm a retired librarian who likes to research information. I live in Defiance County, so I'm not really that outside. I became aware of corporate power back in 2012 when the Occupy movement was educating people about this issue. A group of us began meeting at Cabin Fever to share information. We learned that the power corporations exerted on our society came from the fact that they were legally considered persons. Corporate personhood gives corporations protections like these. First Amendment right to free speech means corporations do not have to label genetically modified foods. It also means corporate money spent on elections is allowable free speech. The Fourth Amendment seizure and search and seizure rights means corporations can avoid subpoenas for unlawful trade and price fixing. Fifth Amendment takings rights means corporations must be compensated for property value lost, even future profits, when regulations are established to protect communities. The 14th Amendment equal protection rights enable corporations to oppose public policies favoring local businesses over multinational corporations. As I learned how corporate personhood came about and that there was a movement to amend the Constitution to change it, I wanted to spend my time assisting. The Defiance Occupy group was small, just a handful, but we were determined. We canvassed the city in 2012, got 866 signatures to put it on the ballot. Somehow, through complications, it didn't get on the 2012 November ballot, it got on the 2013, and it passed successfully with a 67% vote. What got on the ballot was an issue saying that I don't have the exact words, I should have had that, I can get it for you later, but the gist of it was that we do not believe corporations should have corporate personhood rights to enable them to do all of those things I just enunciated under our Bill of Rights, and that money should not be considered free speech. That was the kernel of that initiative, which was passed in 2013.
Can I ask a question?
Mrs. Whitman, you have the
Can I ask a
floor.
question?
Would you like,
Yes.
When you were going around neighborhoods, did you tell everyone the full impact of that amendment? Did you tell them, for example, that it would also take free speech rights away from unions, churches, and other organizations?
I'm sorry, sir. I am not able at present to get into those kinds of questions. And I'm not sure, I don't really have the background to answer that question. And I'm here for the purpose of at least explaining what we did tell the people and upon which information they made a decision as they did.
you're doing a fine job explaining yourself. Carry on.
Okay, my purpose today is to share the story, how corporate personhood happened in this country, the amazing struggle in Ohio between corporations and citizens, and how corporate personhood affects us all today in our daily lives. I have 3 PowerPoint presentations with which to do this. Be advised, they're nothing fancy, just the facts. And I've got my sources here. Now, I need to be talking over there as I'm. Speaker.
Take the microphone with her.
You can take the microphone with you, Dolores.
I'll let you do that. I'm afraid I'll break it or something.
I'm afraid I might break it.
I do have the amendment here if you'd like to see it.
Not right now,
Not
Mr.
right
Peabody,
now.
thank you.
Thank you. All right,
So
now,
there's your clicker.
and this thing is on all the time. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good.
You can see it
I can
there,
do
or
it there.
it's, of course, it's
That'd be
behind.
better. That'd be
Okay.
good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
So the first one I want to show is how corporations became people. And my tremendous amount of information I got for that came from research done by, where is it on here? Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, as well as this book by Tom Hartman called Unequal Protection, which very clearly explains a lot of the details about it. So, how corporations became people.
Point it over this way, Dolores, at the computer. The receiver's here.
Oh, okay, got it. Maybe. I'm present.
No, put. Well, it did work.
Maybe only the one behind us.
No,
It's really to that, huh?
That's what she wants to do.
On the side, maybe?
Not the next slide.
There,
Yeah.
there. So you do, okay. There's no mention of corporation in the Constitution. In colonial times, corporations were tools of the king's oppression. The Hudson Bay Company, the British East India Company, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony were joint stock corporations chartered to exploit the New World and shovel wealth back into Europe. Writers of the Constitution gave control over corporations to state legislatures where they could get closest supervision by the people. The policy was clarified in the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or to the people. The strict controls were imposed on corporations by the states. Corporations could not own stock in other corporations. Corporations were prohibited from any part of the political process. Individual stockholders were held personally liable for any harms done in the name of the corporation. Most corporate charters only lasted 10 or 15 years. In order to receive profit-making privileges for the shareholders, their corporations had to present a clear benefit for the public good, such as building a road, canal, or a bridge. If any of these terms were violated, their charters were revoked by the state legislature. So how did all this corporate control become corporate personhood? Over time, people forgot how corporations oppressed them. The wealthy looked to corporations as a way to shield their personal fortunes. As the right to vote spread to the non-propertied class, the wealthy saw their power threatened. The wealthy took action, influencing legislators, bribing public officials, employing lawyers to write new laws, file court cases challenging corporate unfriendly laws. Bit by bit, decade by decade, state legislatures increased corporate charter length and decreased corporate liability, thereby reducing citizen authority over corporate structure, governance, production, and labor. And then in 1868 came the 14th Amendment, intended to provide citizenship rights to all persons born or naturalized in the United States. And this is the amendment. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And this is the clincher. Nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That's why Tom Hartman named his book Unequal Protection. Anyway, states had already been given control over corporations. Now states were told they could not deprive any person of rights to life, liberty, or property, nor deny any person equal protection under the law. So corporate lawyers got busy. They were put to work to claim those personhood rights for their corporate bosses. The struggle persisted for 20 years. We will see details of that when we get into the Ohio PowerPoint, but for now we'll keep going. Finally, in 1886, the Supreme Court ruled on a case called Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. The case was about whether the railroad owed taxes to the county. The case had nothing to do with corporate personhood. The Chief Justice at the time, this is interesting, from Ohio, his name was Morrison Remick Waite, formerly a lawyer out of Toledo, who specialized in defending railroads and large corporations. For some reason, he made the following statement to the justices before they even rendered their decision on the tax matter. This is what he said. The court does not wish to hear argument on the question whether the provision in the 14th Amendment, which forbids a state to deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws applies to these corporations, we are of the opinion that it does. That's what he said. This statement was placed in the headnotes prior to the actual ruling by the court reporter and was later cited as precedents in subsequent court cases. And thus, corporate personhood became the law of the land. When the Supreme Court never ruled on it, the judge merely said as an introduction, I'm sure we all agree on this, gentlemen, and on it went. The actual ruling by the court on the tax issue between the railroad and the county said nothing about corporate personhood. For an in-depth explanation of this, I really strongly recommend Tom Hartman's book. After 1886, the rulings continued, and I have a timeline of these here that you can, I've got information you folks can look at, my sources. I can't read it that far. In 1889, corporations have due process and equal protection. In 1893, corporations not deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process. In 1905, invalidate government regulations of the corporation. In 1905, again, corporations get search and seizure protection. In 1908, corporations get a right to trial by jury. In 1919, corporations organized primarily for the profit of stockholders. 1922, corporations protected from the Fifth Amendment Takings Clause. In 1976, corporations' political money is free speech. Advertising is free speech. Then came 2010, Citizens United versus Federal Elections Commission Supreme Court case. Corporations gained the right to pour money into political campaigns using political action committees. One of the arguments by a dissenting judge in this case against the decision was that corporations have a legal obligation to work toward profits for their shareholders. They are legally bound to work for profits. This goal is often at odds with the needs of humans and local communities who are out in the political arena. Another dissenting argument was that corporations may be owned by foreign governments, thus allowing their influence on our elections. The rights given to people came from the Bill of Rights. The rights given to corporations were given by the Supreme Court. What is a corporation? In 1803, Chief Justice John Marshall stated, "A corporation is an artificial being, invisible, intangible, and existing only in contemplation of law. Being a mere creature of law, it possesses only those properties which the charter of its creation confers upon it." In 2010, one of the dissenting views against Citizens United from Justice John Paul Stevens stated, "Corporations have no consciences, no beliefs, no feelings, no thoughts, no desires. Corporations help structure and facilitate the activities of human beings, but they are not themselves members of we the people, by whom and for whom our Constitution was established." Critics will say these two opinions represent those opposed to corporate personhood. That's true. But see for yourself what corporations can do. A corporation has become superhuman. It can live forever. It can change its identity in a day. It can cut off parts of itself and from those parts grow new selves. It can own others of its own kind. It can merge with others of its own kind. It does not need fresh air, clean water, or safe food. It fears no illness or death. If found guilty of a crime, it cannot go to prison. Over the years, as a nation, we refuted the legal fiction under slavery that a person is property, and yet we adopted the legal fiction, corporate personhood, in which property becomes a person. Okay, now how do I get to them? Thank you for your attention.
That's it for that presentation.
That's the end of that
This
one.
is what I'd like to do, Dolores. I'd like to open up the floor to anyone else that may want to comment on anything you just said.
Good idea, thank you.
We'll get that for you. Anyone?
Oh, I just want to add something. Well, here's a drawing. I just got off the computer today of 11 conglomerates. Coca-Cola, Unilever, PepsiCo, Kellogg's, Mars, General Mills, Mondelez, Johnson & Johnson, Kraft Heinz, Nestle, and P&G. And all of those little squiggles are companies they own. They've really taken over. They've grown to gargantuan heights. When we were out canvassing, we had a similar one. This is the handout we used in those days back in 2012 when we were going door to door to show people how all these conglomerates are owned by, and there were only 10 here. I keep counting them, but there are 11 here. So I don't know how that happened. It's interesting. Over the years, it changed.
Mr. Peabody has asked for the floor, Dolores, so just state your name and address, please.
Hi, this is Randy Peabody. I live out on 281 in Ayersville, technically, but Defiance County. Obviously, the presentation that was just made is very one-sided and technically wrong in several places. For example, the Citizens United decision ruled on the constitutionality of the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law, which is all the Supreme Court can do, is rule on the constitutionality of something. They found that parts of that McCain-Feingold bill were unconstitutional, so they blocked it, they threw it out. They give no rights to anybody, corporations, or anyone. I can't comment on everything Dolores has mentioned in that presentation. It is just very one-sided, and there's a lot to further explain.
I have a response about the Citizens United. I just copied this from the web the other day, put out by a group called Open Secrets. It says dark money groups have poured billions into federal elections since the Supreme Court's 2020 Citizen United decision. This was published, well, a week or two, oh, there it is, January 24th of this year. And it goes on to give more, a lot of details about the amount of money that's been poured into the political election system because of Citizens United.
If I might.
Watch out.
You're gonna pull her, oops.
Again, what Dolores just described is a result of the laws. The Supreme Court did not grant anyone any special rights. What the corporations and other people did was a result of legislation, not a Supreme Court decision. That's it.
So your next presentation is up here.
Okay, the next one is about the history of Ohio corporations, which is very interesting. We can be proud of our state. They fought long and hard to keep the corporations under control. It's interesting. And that information comes from this wonderful book by Greg, I know that man, what's his last name again? I keep forgetting his last, Greg Coleridge. A lot of good information in there. Anyway, pre-statehood, before Ohio was a state, corporations were in charge. 1787, the new Ohio Company of Associates purchased 1.5 million acres earmarked for Revolutionary War veterans to establish safe settlements. They paid $200,000 for the land, one of the first government subsidies to corporations. The first settlement in Marietta in 1788, the company ran Marietta like a stock company under a board of directors. 1802, finally, the Ohio Constitution came along. Corporations were chartered by the Ohio legislature as was prescribed by the Constitution. Limited duration of a corporate charter, limits on amount of land ownership by a corporation, limits on total investment of owners, and the charter grant was granted only for a specific purpose. And the Ohio Supreme Court validated the state control over corporations. In 1830, the Supreme Ohio Court said a corporation has no power except what is given by its incorporating act. In 1838, natural persons have capacity and power to make and enter into any contracts which are not prohibited by law. A corporation is a body created by law and derives all its powers and capacities from the law of its creation. That was another Ohio Supreme Court statement. 1840, another. A corporation can exercise no powers but such as are expressly given to it by its charter, or such as are necessary to carry into execution those powers conferred by express provision. Between 1839 and 1849, the Ohio legislature repealed several corporate charters. Through the sovereign people were in charge because their legislature and their Supreme Court were keeping tabs on corporations for a while. Would the legislature continue to do the will of the people or that of the corporate influence upon it? It was a tug of war between the people and corporate influence, because in that time period, things were changing. That influence by the wealthy who ran the corporations wanted to get into, make some changes. So in 1837, there was an Ohio loan law passed by the legislature. It provided loans to corporations to develop railroads, canals, and roads. Favoritism was exhibited to certain companies, resulted in a $20 million state debt in 1837. It resulted in increased taxes. It resulted in the loss of public faith. The law became known as the Plunder Law. In 1842, the People's State Legislature fought back. The Plunder Law was repealed. General rules were created to govern corporate activity. They removed the requirement of corporate charters being granted through a specific statute. I don't quite understand what that means. They removed immunity of corporate managers and stockholders from personal liability. In 1845, the corporations came back. Corporate officials and their agents forced the legislature to eliminate their personal liability for corporate wrongdoing. By 1850, the people had had enough. People want a new constitution. A ballot proposal submitted to the people of Ohio was approved by 73%. In the 1851 Constitution, legislature can no longer pass special laws benefiting corporations. Legislature cannot collude with corporations. Legislature's law is the only source of corporate power. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court has other ideas. It makes a big decision in 1819, Dartmouth College versus Woodward. The state of New Hampshire could not revoke a charter granted to Dartmouth College because it was a contract. Contracts are protected by the U.S. Constitution's Contracts Clause. The state cannot take away contracts from a private entity. The opponents argued, contract implies an equal relationship among the parties to it. People are sovereign. Corporations are subordinate to people. Legislature represents people. Legislature can revoke corporate contract. That's what the opponents argued, but they were apparently defeated. The Ohio Supreme Court ruled in agreement with these opposing arguments in 4 cases in 1853 alone. A year later, the U.S. Supreme Court overruled the Ohio Supreme Court's decisions. For 50 years, the Ohio Supreme Court ruled against corporations. And then the U.S. Supreme Court intervened again. 1886, the one we discussed earlier. The Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad case, where headnotes mentioned corporate personhood and mistakenly was cited as precedent. Corporations were henceforward given personhood rights under the Bill of Rights. And following this, the dominoes started to fall. Pardon me. 1912, Ohio Constitutional Convention. Corporate employers not legally liable became not legally liable. And they instituted the regulation of corporate harms. Corporations formerly having no power except that conferred upon them by the people now have become regulated. This was a win for corporations. Regulatory agencies and corporations. They shielded the corporations from the public. Their decisions could be appealed to the courts. It was cheaper to buy influence from a few regulators rather than an entire legislature. And the Ohio legislature continued to broaden the power of corporations. 1927, Ohio legislature repealed the single-purpose rule, helped pave the way for today's conglomerates, of multiple businesses in different fields of operation. And they simplified procedures for incorporating. It became a perfunctory bureaucratic hurdle. And it gave corporations rights possessed by natural persons. It protected directors. Well, this is 1927 Ohio legislation. Protected directors, managers, and stockholders from liability for a corporation's behavior. And in 1965, Article 8, Section 13 added, allowed the state to promote economic development by making loans and issuing bonds to private corporations. It took over 100 years, but corporations finally overcame the restrictions written into the 1851 Constitution. I guess that's the end of that one.
Again, anyone else like to comment? I'll bring you the microphone. Next tab. Thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
All set, Dolores?
Yep.
Want to test that clicker out quick? Okay.
Yep. Okay.
All right.
How does corporate personhood affect Defiance? The following charts show data for the U.S. as a whole, but it would be hard to prove that they do not reflect conditions for people living in Defiance, Ohio. Wages. I better look over here. The red line is median executive income up 430%, corporate profits up 250%, average wage income up 26%. Minimum wage, okay, this is old. I just checked today, and as of January 1st, the minimum wage in Ohio is now $10.10. Productivity. Productivity is way up there, the blue line, and average hourly wages is way down there. Labor's share of corporate income. Corporate profits and taxes paid. The red line is corporate profits. Then those two lines down below, they're federal government's tax receipts on corporate income. And the other one is federal government tax receipts on corporate income before taxes. I don't understand that difference, but. Decline of U.S. manufacturing jobs. I found an interesting, more recent one on that. Unfortunately, it's awful. It's too bad, but what it does, this is through 2015, and right up here, it jogs up at around 2018, and that's the end of it. It's very interesting. I don't remember who was in power in 2018. Oh, I don't remember that, but anyway. Okay, next one, financial sector profits have gone way up. Student debt, as we all know. Consumer debt. U.S. government debt. I got a recent one on that too. It's off the charts. Where is that sheet?
Oh, break it, you bought it.
Hello. Is it still?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay, look at this. National debt, 31,457,245,056,832. And that was as of like 2 o'clock this afternoon. It's this constant clock that's going every day, every minute of every day. Okay. Military spending, the United States versus the other countries of the world. Healthcare costs, the United States versus all the other countries of the world. Annual healthcare costs per capita, US versus the other countries. Life expectancy versus, this is an average of these 6. US's life expectancy. Food stamps, median family income, home ownership. Meanwhile, how is life going for those who passed the laws? Let's take a look at that. Congressional millionaires, and I double-checked this, it's still true. About 51% of the Congress are millionaires, as opposed to the little bit of us that are not. And why is this information not spread far and wide among the populace? Because these 6 companies control much of US media. See all those other things are all kinds of media companies, and those bluish dots are the 6 controllers, because it shows how they all are connected to those companies. So that's why our media is controlled and we don't know what's going on. Albert Einstein said private capital tends to become concentrated in few hands. The result of these developments is an oligarchy of private capital, the enormous power of which cannot be effectively checked, even by a democratically organized political society. I would like to recall, it was democracy at work in 2013 when 67% of the people voting saw the evidence and made their decision. That was real democracy. Unfortunately, somehow between here and up to where all the decisions are made, it gets lost. That wasn't in the slide presentation. I guess that's the end of that. And on that same regard, back in 2011, I found this, and I wish you could see it. It's this, it's a circle, a huge circle with a gazillion dots on it. And it says, the capitalist network that runs the world. And this was done by an immense computer program they did, feeding in all these names of these owners and board members of all these corporations. And they all ended up, oh, I'm on his board, I'm on her. He's married to her, she's got his daughter, and so they're all connected. This network that runs our world is just all these little speckles. They're holding all that power. It's what Albert Einstein was talking about. It becomes private capital becomes concentrated in a few hands. And with that, I will cease.
Yield
Thank you
the
very
floor.
much. Pardon me?
I say yield the floor.
Yes.
Would anyone else like to comment? Mr. Peabody?
Again, this is Randy Peabody. I have a lot of comments. Let's take the last picture that Dolores showed us. I think everyone here has heard the old saying about computers, garbage in, garbage out. It is possible when you're writing the program a computer runs by to get whatever results you want to show. I have no doubt that that program that printed that diagram was programmed by someone who wanted to show that very thing. As far as her figures on the United States, there is a great website, I believe it's called the usdebtclock.org. It shows hundreds of continuously running clocks, how the debt goes up, how our interest goes up, student debt, manufacturing jobs, just everything. As she stated, the national debt is $31 trillion. Corporate tax revenue was $436.1 billion. The three largest budget items in the United States, number one is Medicare at $1.5 trillion, Social Security at $1.2 trillion, and Defense and War at a mere $776 billion. The United States gross domestic product was $26.2 trillion. So we can see that the debt is larger than everything we produce in 1 year. One surprising fact I wrote down, I believe it's $7.2 trillion debt held by foreign countries. That's surprising. I do have the amendment that was circulated and that the move to amend wants to pass. This is the move to amend amendment, taking first of all from the move to amend website, and this in particular is quoted from the joint resolution in the House. The rights protected by the Constitution of the United States are the rights of natural persons only. Artificial entities established by the laws of any state, the United States, or any foreign state shall have no rights under this Constitution and are subject to regulation by the people through federal, state, or local laws. The privileges of artificial entities shall be determined by the people through federal, state, or local laws and shall not be construed to be inherent and inalienable. Section 2, Section 2. Federal, state, and local government shall regulate, limit, and prohibit contributions and expenditures, including a candidate's own contributions and expenditures, to ensure that all citizens, regardless of their economic status, have access to the political process, and that no person gains as a result of their money substantially more access or ability to influence in any way the election of any candidate for public office or any ballot measure. Federal, state, and local government shall require that any permissible contributions and expenditures be publicly disclosed. The judiciary shall not construe the spending of money to influence elections to be speech under the First Amendment. So that's what was presented and passed in 2013, I guess. And that's the reason we're all here now. Before we move too much farther along, I'd like to remind everyone that we do live in a what the amendment said, republic. We live in a republic, not a democracy. I think it's rather inane that these meetings are called Democracy Day meetings, because we don't have a democracy in this country. We have a republic. Excuse me, I'm looking through my notes. I guess that's all I've got for now.
Right here. Anyone from City Council? Any other members of the public? Well, certainly I appreciate everyone coming this evening. It was good to have all of you here, and with no other information from the floor, I'll adjourn.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
What definition of corporations are you using?
Sir, I don't use one definition. I'm sorry, I merely came today to explain how democracy occurred here, 2013, with citizens seeing the facts, making a decision, expressing their opinion. And based on their awareness of the world as they saw it and the information we were presenting, they made a decision. That was democracy. They sent it on. I really cannot argue corporations. Lawyers, Supreme Court justices will disagree on what a corporation is. So far be it from me to try to describe it, except I know it should not live forever and be able to break into 1,000 pieces and grab other beings to it. It shouldn't exist as the charts I've showed today. They've become gargantuan. We work for mom and pop corporations, which thank God for them. They don't seem to be the problem. They are not the ones that are affecting the laws that are causing our labor costs to be, our labor for our jobs and our middle class standard of living to be destroyed, and billions spent on war and billions spent on healthcare, and yet we have a median lifespan less than the average of 6 other countries. So somehow or other, that democracy, which sometimes can work beautifully down here, isn't getting up there, and I believe corporate power has something to do with it.
I found another note that I'd like to mention.
Sit down, Mr. Peabody. I'll bring you the microphone.
Thank you. All right, part of the problem here when talking about corporations is what definition of a corporation you use. According to dictionaries, corporations are an artificial entity. Now, you may not be able to see this. I have a picture of an artificial entity someplace here. Well, I don't have it. Yes, I do. To me, that's what an artificial entity looks like. Something with hoses, wires, kind of like a robot. It's artificial. Another definition is a legal entity, a group of individuals. I prefer to use a group of individuals. Corporation is a group of individuals, mostly with a common goal, who come together to, first of all, make money. That's the object of every corporation. Make money for the shareholders, but to just represent themselves, tell the public what they believe and what they think. When it comes to free speech and political positions, I think the last description is best. Corporations and businesses are formed by people, oftentimes a group of people with similar businesses. Why should those people lose their rights to free speech or their ability to comment publicly on issues simply because they represent a business? Quite often, we do not get the whole agenda of what a resolution or a law would do. It is necessary to get input from all different positions. Businesses are one of those we need input from to tell what a particular law would do. For example, when ex-President Obama wanted to hold congressional hearings about car manufacturers' economic strength, he did not call cars to the White House. He called people who made cars, people who ran those businesses. Those people represented the corporations. That's exactly what happens today. A couple of weeks ago, General Motors supposedly made an announcement that they were going to make an investment in some Ohio plants. General Motors did not make that announcement. The officers of General Motors made that decision, made that announcement. A picture in the paper, I believe it was today, showed Governor DeWine at a meeting in Columbus, I believe, along with representatives from Honda. The caption or the article said that these people made the announcement of what Honda was going to do. Honda Corporation did not make that announcement. Representatives of that corporation made the decision, made the announcement. What's going on is there's a form of propaganda called personalization. You ascribe actions to inanimate objects such as corporations that only people can act on. I worked for 40 years for General Motors. General Motors never made an announcement to us. It was always representatives of General Motors. I think we have to draw a distinction there. The officers, the members of corporations are people. They have a right to free speech. I believe what the move to amend is doing is unconstitutional. You cannot separate those rights from people or corporations. That's the way I feel.
Right. Okay, thank you. Again, I'd like to thank members of council present. We have a majority of them here. And thank you, Ms. Elders, for being here.
Well, I don't know if I made the last meeting such as this, but I know I was here before that one then, but
We didn't have one 2 years ago, Mr. Peabody,
All right.
because of COVID.
okay, so I didn't miss that one. I made this point 4 years ago then. At the time, the attorney for the city of Defiance was here, and he thought that if city council passed a resolution to eliminate these meetings, that would be all it would take to so eliminate these. I wish someone would make that resolution. I also wish somebody would make a resolution to change this name from democracy to, can't think of the word. Republic Day.
By charter, the citizens have a right to circulate petitions to do exactly what they did, and they passed that. And I think
You're right.
this council is honoring the wishes of the voters at that time.
You're right.
Mr. Williams would have been the attorney 4 years ago. I think I'm under the impression that if city council wanted to do that they would have the power, the authority to place the initiative on the ballot, and then the voters would have to decide. Or the voters could again place the issue on the ballot to try and abolish this. I don't believe city council has the authority, without doing a little research, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, without without the voters' approval. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't think it's too much of a burden for us to show up here on a Thursday night every other year.
You're right about that. But the resolution also requires council to forward a letter, does it not?
Actually, it requires me to do that, and those things were all done.
Okay, but in that letter, did you indicate how small the meeting was?
It's not what I'm instructed to do in the letter.
Well,
It's my job to follow what it says, not editorialize.